Shove it, man!
It's the main character here, Marky D. Bit more of a serious video today. I've been wanting to make this one for a while and several people have asked me to shove it, so here it is. Somehow no one has made a video on this, but I think there's as much to this story that it deserves its own video. Much lesser wrestling relationships have been covered by these boring YouTube channels. I'm sure you've all heard of the Chris Benoit, Nancy and Kevin Sullivan love triangle, and you also know about Edge, Matt Hardy and Lita. But what about this one? It's the Kurt Angle, Karen and Jeff Jarrett love triangle. The time TNA used an incredibly difficult real life story and turned it into a reality TV style wrestling storyline. I hope you enjoy my original content, or I hit you with a brick. Kurt and Karen Angle were married in 1998 before his WWE debut. I need to make it clear at the start of this video that Kurt Angle was by no means an angel when it comes to the ladies. He reportedly cheated on Karen multiple times. The biggest scandal that's known is Dawn Marie, but it's also heavily rumoured that there was something going on with Jacqueline. Anyway, over the next few years, Kurt worked a grueling schedule and his body was pretty beat up by 2006. Angle wanted time away from the WWE to heal up, whilst the WWE wanted Angle to receive treatment for his addiction to pain medication. Kurt refused the help and instead left the WWE and signed for TNA. At the time of Kurt signing for TNA, he was their highest profile signing, and this drew new eyes to the product. Jeff Jarrett, on the other hand, had been married to his wife Jill since 1992, but she sadly passed away in 2007 from breast cancer. Kurt was destroying it in TNA and his feud with Samoa Joe was gaining record buy rates for the TNA pay-per-views, but his life outside of wrestling at this time was a shambles. His addiction to pain medication had spiralled out of control, and he was now taking even more pain meds and mixing them as a dangerous cocktail with alcohol. Kurt and Karen had 2 children together, born in 2002 and 2006, but you've got to believe with Kurt Angle so reliant on his pain meds and booze that he had to be hard to deal with at home and around his family. So that's the backstory for the real life stuff at the time, but in storyline terms, Karen Angle became an on-screen character in 2007 as Kurt Angle was feuding with Samoa Joe. Karen claimed that Kurt Angle was a bad husband and was abusive towards his children, and Karen sided with Samoa Joe. With the X Division title, tag titles and world title all on the line between Kurt and Joe, Kurt would win all the belts with Karen turning on Joe. With Karen now as a heel, she became pretty unbearable. She was so bitchy, angry and constantly bickering with Kurt Angle during his promos. Kurt lost his X Division title and tag titles at the No Surrender pay-per-view as he was forced to work triple duty, but he did retain his world title against the Idiot Abyss. Throughout 2008, a relationship between AJ Styles and Karen was hinted at, but nothing was confirmed. Angle continued his mistreatment of Karen throughout the year, as art started to imitate real life. It was suggested in storyline terms that they end their marriage, and both seemed happy to do it. AJ continued to be pretty much obsessed with Karen, and kept talking about her and was constantly distracted. Kurt eventually begged Karen to forgive him for all the mistreatment, but Karen left him crying in the ring. Angle and Styles clashed in a great match at Slammiversary 2008, which Karen helped AJ win, so in storyline terms it wasn't exactly looking good for their marriage. Back in their real life, or is it their fake life, or I don't know what's real anymore, Kurt Angle started filming a reality TV show called The Real Angle, and a pilot was leaked online. A lot of interesting things were talked about during this show, about Angle's pill addiction, his alcohol abuse, and the pain that he was going through. He also admits during this that he cheated for around 2 years on Karen Angle, with a woman who then became obsessed with him and stalked him. It was a really interesting watch if you want to get to know the behind the scenes Kurt Angle for around this time. But again, they were trying to be entertaining for a reality TV show, so a lot of it's probably hyped up. Next up, Kurt and Jeff Jarrett would meet for the first time on pay-per-view at Bound for Glory 2008. I recently reviewed that pay-per-view, so check out the link on the screen now. It was a great match and did touch on elements of real life, but it was mostly just storyline driven. Jarrett came out victorious after help from Mick Foley. Just after this, Karen left TNA citing family reasons. After months of storyline trouble in their relationship, the couple divorced for real, and it was finalised in October 26, 2008. Angle continued challenging Jeff Jarrett in storyline, who kept putting roadblocks up and having Kurt fight other wrestlers, but they did eventually clash again 3 months later at Genesis 2009. Interestingly, Kurt Angle was being portrayed as the villain in the storyline. He was harassing Jarrett and his children. He even went as far to say that Kurt would make Jeff's children orphans, but don't worry, he'd look after them. This match really upped the intensity from the last match, and it was fought under no DQ rules. Kurt Angle hit an Angle slam off the entrance ramp through a table. He almost killed Jeff Jarrett. This match was even better than the last one, with Angle picking up the clean win. Angle continued to assault Jeff Jarrett after the bell, and Jarrett ended the night being carried out on a stretcher. So just to set the scene before it all kicks off, it's now 2009. Kurt and Karen are now divorced. Kurt is the main eventer in TNA, and then on the other side you have Jeff Jarrett, who at the time is head of creative. According to Vince Russo, Jeff Jarrett and Karen Angle were also big drinkers, but they were also incredibly sociable, and they would always be the last ones awake at the TNA drinking sessions. This meant that they spent a lot of time around each other. Kurt was more of an introvert, and he'd want to go home and sleep after wrestling. Kurt started to have suspicions that something was going on with Jeff and Karen, and Kurt threatened Jeff in a hotel room one night, but everything was denied by Jarrett. Kurt had to be talked down from quitting TNA at this point. What a situation you have here. You have the top star in TNA completely fallen out with the head of creative. Jeff Jarrett denied everything until he was blue in the face, including promising TNA owner Dixie Carter that nothing was going on. The game was eventually up when Dixie Carter attended a party which was hosted by Jeff and Karen. Dixie was livid about this and was annoyed that Jeff Jarrett had lied to her. Dixie sought revenge and sent home Jim Cornette and Dutch Mantell because they were friends with Jarrett. After this, on the Bubba the Love Sponge show, a TNA wrestler called in with a voice changer to break the news that Karen Angle and her kids had started living with Jeff Jarrett. Bubba came across as completely insensitive and tried to leave Kurt a voicemail telling him the news whilst on the radio. The path of destruction continued as Jeff Jarrett was sent home. All of his segments were pulled, which was unfortunate for Eric Young, who was feuding with Jarrett at the time. Maybe Eric Young as leader of the World Elite would have been more impactful if this feud with Jarrett had gone ahead. To Kurt Angle's credit, it's reported by several wrestlers that Kurt showed incredible restraint when in the locker room when he was near Jeff Jarrett. The wrestlers were pretty upset about it too, as it's supposed to be taboo to be with another wrestler's wife. Technically Jeff did nothing wrong, as both him and Karen were single at the time, and he denies an affair. But if you were Kurt, you couldn't stop yourself from having thoughts, could you? Jarrett lost all his power and was taken off TV for 6 months. In an ill-fated rebound relationship, Angle started dating fellow TNA wrestler Raka Khan, but it ended badly as Khan claims Angle assaulted her and stole her money. But on the other side, Khan refused to leave Angle's house. It went to court, but the case was dropped. Khan was then released by TNA. Whatever happened there, it does sound like Angle's private life was getting out of control. Jarrett returned to TNA around the end of 2009 when the Hawk was gearing up to take over TNA, and Jeff was relegated to flipping burgers and cleaning toilets in storyline terms. Jeff turned heel, becoming an important member of the New Immortal faction after a while, even though it made no sense. He claimed he did it to get back at Dixie for taking his power away. Around this time, Jeff Jarrett married Karen, for real, making her Karen Jarrett, less than 2 years after Karen divorced from Kurt. Jeff then started feuding with Kurt again and beating up children and jobbers in MMA matches. 2 years after their last match, Kurt Angle would face Jeff Jarrett again at Genesis 2011, although this time it was an MMA match. Needless to say, it wasn't as good as their last match, but it's incredible to think that these two were able to perform without killing each other for real. Kurt immediately took a shot at Jarrett in the pre-match promo by telling Jarrett, "If you want to know about my shape, you can ask my ex-wife." Angle calmly controlled the fake MMA match until Jarrett decided to start cheating. This was basically a TV angle on pay-per-view. Jarrett beat down Angle and proclaimed that Karen would be returning on the next Impact. And she did. Karen returned to say that Kurt was not going to ruin her life anymore. The crowd were brutal and chanted sloppy seconds. Kurt took out Jarrett and then had to look his ex in the eye for a good 30 seconds. Can you imagine having to do that? Anyone who's ever been through a breakup, most of the time you never want to have to see that person again, because it tends to be painful. Kurt and Jarrett again clashed on pay-per-view at Against All Odds 2011. This one had severe implications. If Kurt Angle lost, he would have to walk his ex-wife Karen down the aisle, as Karen and Jeff announced they would be renewing their wedding vows. If Kurt wins the match, he gets custody back of his 2 children. This match was weak by their standards, considering it was their first proper pay-per-view since everything went down. Way too much interference from Karen, which took away from the match. Karen literally got involved 5 times. Why doesn't the referee just send her to the back? It's so frustrating. Jarrett eventually won the match, countering a sunset flip. Kurt now has to walk his ex-wife down the aisle. Jesus Christ. And this segment started out horrendous because Eric Young and Orlando Jordan are the Flower Girls. Can you imagine having to do this? How horrible for Kurt. Do you think that when you look at this, TNA was wrong to turn their real-life problems into a storyline? Kurt wrecked it on the first take anyway, and throws Karen into the wedding cake. They have to do a second take later in the show, and Kurt was smirking the whole way through. They wrote their own vows, and Jarrett said things such as, "You are now married to a real man." Karen also threw Kurt under the bus and talked a lot about how great their sex life is. They then proceed to lip lock and look at Kurt Angle. I do not understand how Kurt went through with this. I couldn't do it. After the vows, Kurt destroys the set with an axe. Throughout this whole feud, Karen and Jeff are constantly rubbing it in Kurt's face and reminding him that Jeff has taken his kids away. You can't help but feel bad for Kurt. They then clashed again on pay-per-view at Lockdown 2011 in a 2 out of 3 falls cage match. Kurt has a habit of trying to kill himself at Lockdown. This match is already better because Karen gets sent straight to the back. Kurt makes Jarrett tap for the first fall. Jarrett wins the second fall with a clunky anticlimactic pin. This crowd is horrible, by the way, proving that it's not always better to be out of the impact zone. The final fall is escape the cage. Angle has multiple chances to leave the cage, but decided to stay in to try and hurt Jeff Jarrett. I'm not here to give a full rundown of the matches, but I have to point this one out. I'm not sure what they were going for here, but it looks like it hurt. I remember watching this at the time and I thought Kurt was dead. He proves he's a cyborg though by immediately hitting the angle slam from the top rope straight after. Kurt then has a chance to leave again when he climbs the cage, but just like last year, Kurt then decides he wants to die and does a moonsault from the top. He barely makes any contact with Jeff Jarrett, but Jeff is pretty much dead at this point. When Kurt goes to leave through the cage door, Karen runs back out and sprays Kurt in the eyes with something. "Get rid of her, ref, she's not meant to be here, you moron." Karen then gives Jeff a guitar, and Jeff nails Kurt in the head, and she pulls him to the door, and hits Kurt Angle in the head with the steel cage door, so Jeff can win the match. It was a great match again, but I have to say, I wish Karen would piss off. This is where the feud should have ended. They'd done everything they possibly could have done, but it didn't. Kurt decided because of Karen's constant interference in his matches that he would bring in someone to back him up, and out of the blue, Chyna debuted in TNA as Kurt's backup. Honestly, it all just looked a bit sad seeing her like this. They had her work a mixed tag match at Sacrifice 2011. Honestly, it's not worth a watch. There was nothing riding on it and Kurt was smiling and having a good time the whole way through. Kurt and Chyna win, and Chyna can barely do any basic wrestling moves at this point. But the feud was still not over and it continued with Karen Angle getting knocked down a flight of stairs and sent to hospital. And just like that, Kurt was finally free to face Jeff without any interference. See, Kurt, you didn't need to bring in people from the Attitude Era to control Karen. You just needed her to fall down a flight of stairs. The match would take place at Slammiversary 2011 in what was billed as their final match. Kurt's Olympic medal was also on the line, and there's also a #1 contendership for the world title. This match is so important that it goes on last on the show, after the world title match that night. Anyway, it's decent, and Kurt wins the match, making Jeff Jarrett tap out. But I ain't done. In typical TNA fashion, there was one more match after the last one more match, despite the last one being billed as the last match. Jeff Jarrett begged Kurt for another match, and if he lost this time he would have to move to Mexico. In a match more fitting of everything that had gone down in real life, the two had a parking lot brawl. Surrounded by all the TNA roster, Kurt Angle choked Jeff Jarrett out with his t-shirt, and just like that, Jeff Jarrett was done, with Immortal, Kurt Angle and TNA. So to sum the whole storyline up, I don't know how I felt about it. It obviously created a great feud and matches throughout 2011. But wow, Kurt Angle is a much bigger man than the Hawk. I wouldn't have been able to work with Jeff Jarrett. They all seem to be quite amicable nowadays. I guess they have to be for their kids' sake. But let the Hawk know down below. What did you think about TNA turning their real life problems into a storyline? But as far as matches go, my favourite was probably before the real life problems kicked in. Genesis 2009. Watching that one back, it felt like these two really hated each other, and it could have gone down after all the real life problems had happened. Kurt seemed so enraged throughout the whole match. Let me know which match was your favourite, and if you think it was their MMA match, I got 7 words for you. Shut up or I'll smack you one.